Hey, here with TheEZGZ. I thought I'd start my sand series today and give you some of my insight to what we did on the sand and how I got connected up with Volkswagens in the first place back in the early 90s. And we'll cover a bunch of different things here. This is probably going to be a little long, but there's some basic stuff to cover, and as we go on in future videos, I'll be able to get into maybe some finer details and some other things, but I want to lay the groundwork here and show you a few things. And I wondered already why people ask me, says, you think you're going to have enough to do when you retire? Don't you think you're going to get bored? So that sure hasn't happened. I don't know where the days go by, but I got out some of my old scrapbooks, which is kind of fun to do, and was looking at old pictures here. And here's a picture of me out in the sand dunes with one of my very first sand cars. Look at the cool way the sand gets picked up by those number 4 paddles. If you've ever been in for a ride in a sand car, those tires really put out a buzzing noise, and if the sand's wet, it will even make it louder. Here was an interesting fellow that was in our sand group early on. His name was Les. He's still around today running in sand cars. That man has no arms. His arms are cut off just below the shoulders, and he drives strictly with his feet. He has a special steering mechanism his friends made, and a shifter. He uses his foot to shift it. I saw that guy pull up on the sand dunes with a Bronco, pulling his dune buggy. I didn't know who he was, and he got out and he started kicking stuff with his feet, and I thought, who the hell is that guy? And he was putting down the ramps and unlashing things with his feet, had one shoe on and one shoe off, got in that car, fired it up, and took off. And he had these shirt sleeves that were flopping around, and I don't know what the hell, I was freaking me out. And somebody told me, oh yeah, that's Les, he lives up here, and he doesn't have no arms, he had an accident. And it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. But he's a wonderful guy, and I think I've seen some videos. They're doing some special medical things and using him as a guinea pig to make things. Now, I'm sorry I get off topic like this, but I'm often, this happens. Here's a picture of my first car. This was early after my divorce. My son was 9, my daughter was like 15. He was getting a little bit older, and things were kind of crazy, and I felt like I was kind of losing my son, and I was really searching for something that we both enjoyed. He was into, what is that, Nintendo and skateboarding and stuff like that, and I was looking for some hobby that we would both like, and these guys at work had hauled me up to the sand dunes one weekend, and I saw this sand pile, and I got a ride in a sand car, and this guy named Mark had a 2180, and we went down this hill and pulled up, and he started doing a wheelie, and I freaked out. I was grabbing on him, just like, holy shit, I'm gonna die. And the front end came down, we were sailing across the sand dunes. The front wheels were just open, just kind of like pounding up and down, and I thought, oh, this is totally like awesome. What is this car? Where'd you get it? And he told me that he bought it, and so I went out and I bought this car. It turned out that guy lived in my town. I took it over to his house, and he says, I was all excited. I says, yeah, I got this car, and now we can go to the sand dunes together. And he says, well, that ain't gonna work. And I said, what do you mean? He says, it's too heavy. That ain't gonna work. You don't have room for the paddle tires. Well, this was street legal, and I was living in a townhouse that didn't even have a garage, so I had to park it in the parking lot. And I thought it was cool because I could lock it up, and it had a license plate. Well, we soon found that he was right. Here's a picture of the car after we stripped it down. Here's a picture of my son helping me with the work. We were taking the glass out. It had radios in it and all kinds of bullshit. And so he was digging it. He thought this was pretty fun, and it was really bringing me and my son together with something that we both enjoyed, and that was the best part about it. Well, as time went on, you know, we were wheeling around and having fun. I bought a different car. It had a Pinto engine in the back. It was cast iron. It had a bus transmission. It would lift the front end pretty damn easy. And here I am doing a wheelie up a hill. Here's an interesting picture that I have of a guy that did a wheelie and stalled, and his buggy was just stopped, sticking up in the air, and he's hollering to this guy over here on the side of the hill, hey, come pull me down. And half the guys were, you know, drinking beers back then and going for ride, doing crazy stuff. We used to change the tires on them, and we go ripping up and down riverbeds in Moab, Utah. Here I am with a buddy one winter time, and we're going up Bartlett Wash. Now it's all closed off. Things have changed. Here was one of the other influential people in my sandrail career, and that was a guy named Yukon Jack. This mofo was crazy. He had this ultralight sandrail with a 2275, and he was a wheeling fool, man. I'm telling you, he would do some crazy stunts with that thing. Here's a group of us. You can see how vast the sand dunes were. This is up in Idaho. My son's sitting in the car here, and this is my car. This is my buddy Kurt Rockhopper, and a whole bunch of a ragtag crew stretch out across the sand. And this is just some books and crazy stuff that, you know, I showed you that picture of my 1776. We used to wheelie up the hill, we used to wheelie over the top, and then you want something different, you just pop the clutch as you're going downhill. Do a wheelie while you're going downhill. You can't see what's down there, and you got your front end in the air. We could see through the floor. We used expanded metal in the floor, but we used to scream through the sand dunes, and we were just always had those front wheels up in the air. The oil light was coming on and off, and it was crazy. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy. Here's here here I couldn't get this car to wheelie worth a darn, and I told my friend Mark, I says, here, you go up the hill, I'm going to stand in the back. I thought my extra weight would leverage it up, and he's popping the clutch, trying to get this thing to do a wheelie with me standing on the back. What a friggin' idiot. Here's me in the Pinto buggy again. We're wheeling up. I mean, that's all there was to do here. This is choke cherry. This is pretty amazing. This was like one of the toughest hills in Idaho. I know I'm jumping all over North America, but I think this is some guys sitting down there waiting for their turn to go next. That's how small it was. This hill was steep. I ain't kidding you. This is when it still had choke cherry bushes on it. And here's another one. Looks like Mark coming up out of Dead Man. And we had names for all these little hills and places that we used to hang out. And I can feel it. Just telling you guys a story, I get excited because this was just wonderful time in my life, and I was having the time of my life with my best friends, and it was just great. I got all these tires and spent all this money, and we would just little bits at a time. We would make improvements and upgrades, and some guys had more money than others, and they would upgrade their stuff and pass on the old stuff down to those poor guys, you know. But we were all having fun, dragging each other around, and we were always wrenching on the cars, trying to keep them running, and we were always breaking shit and abusing stuff and running into stuff, and then I decided I had a small motor. That little car of mine, I had a 1776, and I ran the bejesus out of that thing. It's the one I showed you in the garage with the sand seal pulley, and I thought at some point. I was learning about Volkswagens and Volkswagen engines, reading Hot V-Dubs, and they had this sand sports and special magazines for guys interested in the sands, and a lot of people had quads, ATVs and stuff, and what was that Suzuki 500? It was a 500cc two-stroke single that just was a screamer. That thing really ate the sand, I'll tell you. So in my quest for learning, I think I picked up this book here. This was it had a picture of a Volkswagen engine, and it said how to hot rod, and it's like, well, yeah, that's what I want to do, is I want more horsepower to my engine. And he kept referring in this book to a guy named Gene Berg, and so I got one of his sales catalogs, you know. I was like, what's this guy got? And he had in this book, throughout this book, he had all these tech tips and technical information, FYI, and just tons of stuff. And it was like, well, this is pretty cool. I think I bought some stuff, and then I bought these damn blue books, which have been a curse. Those blue books have been a curse. One of the best books I got, and somebody at work had given this to me, by Jeff Hubbard, and it's I don't care if you're sand, off-road, what you're doing. This is a good foundation source for keeping your ride alive out there in the off-road situations. But back to these blue books, this guy Berg, I mean, he was selling products. He was campaigning a 67 Bug that was doing 10-second quarter miles, 9,000 RPM, 5-speed transmission. I mean, it was living and it was breathing, and he was really arrogant about all of his stuff and everything he would say. Everybody else's stuff was shit, and his was top-of-the-line crap, and he was out to prove it, and he was selling products, and everybody else that was using his products was succeeding, making a name for themselves. I didn't know how phenomenal it was, but I started going out to the sand and saying, hey, you're not doing that right. You should be doing it the way Gene Berg says, and Gene Berg says this, and Gene Berg. I had the book memorized, man. I was like quoting him to my buddies out on the sand, and they were saying, "Who the f is Gene Berg?" And I said, "Oh, he's a great sand rail or engine builder, Volkswagen engine builder." So I went to this guy in town. I still didn't have a tools or place to work on anything, and I went to this shop and I said, I want you to build me a 2110. So he did, and it was a huge improvement over my 1776. I was out there ripping around the sand dunes, and he told me that he put a Web 119 in it, which was an off-road cam, and it was big valve heads and an 82 stroke, and yeah, like I said, it ran great. But you know what? I couldn't catch those guys that had the 2276s that I ran with. Them 2275, whatever you want to call it. Those guys were leaving me. I just couldn't quite keep up with them on the hills, and in some of the straightaways, they had the edge on me, and I didn't know it at the time. A lot of it was weight. You get the aluminum wheels, and you start getting rid of the tin and the shutters, which Gene Berg said, oh no, don't you ever get rid of those, and it's got to live and last, and you got to do this and that. Well, guess what? It didn't work. And when I started, showed up with my 2110, guys would say, hey, what the hell you got all that crap on your car for? Get that shit off there and save 50 pounds. Get that shit off of there, And it's like, well, no, I gotta have it. It's a brand new engine. I want it to last, and I can't afford to do this again. It's bullshit. It'll work fine. I've had mine for 10 years or whatever. Everybody was telling me I was full of shit, and it's like, well, okay. I just insisted on running it, and then a little bit of time went by. A few seasons went by, and I had to get into that motor myself and start doing some things, and I had my confidence up. I was learning a lot more, and we were all helping each other with our problems, and I got in that motor, and it's like, man, I didn't like what I saw at all. And I said right then and there, I says, I am going to build my own engine. I'm going to build it the way Gene Berg says, and this son of a bitch will be eating those 2276s for lunch. That's what I'm going to do. So a buddy of mine worked at Cousins Auto Parts, and he got an account with CB Performance, and they were having a sale on those stroker cases, the AS21 stroker case. This is back in the 90s. I think it was like $250 a special, and I bought one of those cases, and it sat in my bedroom floor for a couple years while I saved up some more money, and my 2110 was still running, so it was no big rush, So I had the 1776 for a backup, and I had my 2110, and I was pretty happy. So finally, I decided to build that 2110, and I couldn't afford a Gene Berg crank, that was for sure. Uh-oh, sounds like my phone's ringing. I've been waiting for a phone call. So, where was I? Yeah, I had this 1776, and it was a grenade somebody had built, and everything was wrong, but everything was right, if you know what I mean. The dang thing ran, and I eventually, when I decided I was going to build my 2110, I thought, you know what? I got the 2110 in the car. I'm going to freshen this one up so that I learn the little intricacies of building a Volkswagen engine, because they're not like any other type of engine you'll deal with. And I ordered at the time I was a 69 stroke welded counterweighted crank from CB Performance, but I got it through a friend. And when it showed up, it was a 2020 crank, which really bummed me out. And then I took the case down I measured the case, or I took it someplace, but it turned out you couldn't bore it over. It was already line bored, maxed out. I think that's 80 thousandths, which is the limit. They don't make bearings for bigger than that. And gosh, I had this crankshaft, and it's like, crap, what do I do? So I went ahead with it. I went ahead and built it. I did all the Gene-Berg stuff. I bought a lot of Gene-Berg parts. I probably spent as much on that engine. I even had it balanced. I took a half a gram. I had that sucker balanced. And it went back together, and I put Gene-Berg's 295 cam, which was supposed to be tremendous low-end power, and it was a circle trap cam. And I think maybe that about that time was when I got those my little Delorto, my 36 Delorto carbs way back then, and they've been with me and working all these years in the sand and on the streets. So so what did I do? I finished the 1776, and I put it in a car, and I tried it out, and I had that extra engine, and I was wishing that I could run it, and I'd had several Volkswagens. My son had a few Volkswagens, you know, buy and sell stuff. People would donate stuff. They'd give it to me. Somebody at work would know somebody that knew somebody and say, yeah, I got a Volkswagen, the license plate's expired, it doesn't run, it's sitting in front of the house, the cops put a ticket on it. You can have the title if you come and get it. There's, you know, the tires are flat, bring some air. And so I would get these vehicles, and I had a house again by then, and I would tear them apart for parts and keep what I salvaged, what I could for my sand cars, and, you know, just junk the rest, throw it in the trash. So I thought that was kind of cool, and lost my train of thought. So anyhow, I built that 2110, my dream engine, back in the 90s. And I thought, yep, I got the blue books out. I'm going to do this the way Gene says. And I am going to catch those guys with the 2275s and show them that I do know what's going on, because Gene Berg does win races. He's got a 10-second car, 180, 190 horsepower, 10-second quarters, and it's a 2110. Now, of course, mine was an off-road car, and I didn't have Gene Berg parts and the money to buy that sort of stuff. So the next best offering then was Scat, and I don't know, CB Performance was, I think they had run out of crankshafts, which they occasionally run out of parts. They just sell out. They have to have like so many ordered, you know, in order for somebody to do a run manufacturing wherever they get the raw blanks from. And so I thought, okay, Scat's a big name, and I bought their 82 millimeter crank. I bought the best one that they had. I think it was like $700. I went with the Scat HB rods and the ARP bolts and the Molly forged pistons. And I bought the CB Magnum 44 40 by 35 heads like Gene Berg recommended, and I ran the compression through the roof as high, no shims. I think my compression is like 9.5 to 1 and still is today. I had that engine balanced to a half a gram, and man, I thought I was going to be top shit out there in the sand dunes, and I couldn't keep up with those 2275s. Son of a bitch, that pissed me off. Spent all that effort and money, and these guys were still eating my lunch. Well, as luck would have it, and time goes on, I ran across this Carmen Ghia, and I'll insert a picture here of it. And I had that car for like 15 years, but the key to that car, and the reason I bought it originally, is it had a 2275 in it. This guy had this engine put in it, and he was selling the car for the whole car, engine and everything, with the paint job, nice interior, everything, for like $4,000. And I knew that engine alone was worth that. Had the dual 44 IDF carbs, and I says, yeah, I give him the cash right then and there, and drove it home. And I took that 2275 out of the Carmen Ghia, put my 1776 in there, took the 2110 out of my sand rail, and put that 2275 in there, and man, I was crack-a-lacking with everybody else on the sand then. I was just doing the same shit they were, and that engine had a a 110 cam in. I found out years later. I had to get into the oil pump side of it. I put a dry sump oil system and it had a 110 cam. I didn't know what the compression was, and it had big valve heads. But when I built my 2110, everybody else was running those 110s, and the guy that had built my first 2110 had used the Web 119, so I thought, I got to try something different. I was looking for that edge, you know, so I tried the C35 Scat since I was buying all my stuff at one spot. And so that's kind of the way it has been. We just always tried to outdo each other, and we tried to make our stuff more durable and all the little tricks that came up. So it's been a fun ride.